So last year I had a reading goal of 36 books and I ended up reading 37. So I decided that I would go ahead and talk about the 5 books that made the biggest impact on me. I started reading about a year ago, like consistently, and I really wanted to make it a habit because I feel like a lot of the most intelligent people that I know read a lot, and it's supposed to open up your mind, make you a more empathetic and understanding person. And I generally just wanted to have a better grasp on how other people live their lives on the other side of the world, people who grew up different than me, people who have inherently different lives and experiences than I do. And I've really come to enjoy hearing about other people's experiences. So I guess I'll talk about the apps that I use. I use Goodreads to keep track of all of the books that I read, and it also lets you write reviews and rate the books. And it will give you suggestions about what other books you might enjoy, as well as being able to see what your friends are reading. If you have people that you follow, you can also follow certain authors. So overall, really good app. I use it a lot for every single book that I read. I also use Libby and Hoopla, which are free if you have a library card, which is also free to have. So they have digital books, they have audio books, they have everything. And I've really enjoyed those apps as well. And it's a lot of different options. It's not a small library at all. It's a really good amount of books and a rather large selection. So those are the apps that I use personally. I also wanted to talk about what I've learned overall from the books that I read this year. And really, it's just that everybody has a story to tell, everybody has different experiences than you, and being receptive and actually listening to other people's experiences and other people's thoughts on what they're going through and what their life has been like really allows you to have a broader understanding of just our world in general and how really, really different other people's experiences can be than yours personally. And I, again, have grown really, really fond of hearing about other people's experiences and their lives. So I think that was my favorite part of my reading journey this past year with the 37 books that I read, which I realize is not a whole lot of books, but it's the most I've ever read in a year. So I feel happy about that. The first book that I wanted to talk about is Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. And he talks about how time is our only real commodity and how we can't get it back. It's not replenishable, and how he personally likes to have experiences rather than possessions. He puts a big emphasis on really having a genuine interest in people, places, and experiences rather than collecting items that belong to you. And he also talks about increasing your options by decreasing the amount of things that you own. He goes into depth about how free he's made himself, by sort of detaching from the materialistic world. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it. It was pretty short. It was very to the point. Would highly, highly recommend. I had a really great time reading that book. The next book is It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolynn. And he talks about generational trauma and how it can be passed down not only through habits, but actually genetically as well. It was very, very interesting read. I would love to research more about that topic. He does give references in the book as well as his own personal research So I would highly recommend that book as well. It talks about all the effects that, the chemicals in your brain can have when you've been raised in certain environments and gone through certain experiences, and how it can really influence your adult life moving forward because it changes your actual brain chemicals. And it was really interesting to me personally. I had never heard it positioned quite the way he put it, so I really enjoyed that book as well, obviously. And the third book is Finding Ultra by Rich Roll. He talks about his experiences getting sober and transforming his body at about 40, I believe, is how old he was when he made that transition, and just his experience going through that pretty major life change with his diet and his habits, and becoming who he is now. If you don't know about Rich Roll, he's a very interesting and very accomplished man. I would go down that rabbit hole if you haven't heard of him. He has a podcast, and his family is absolutely beautiful. He's a very motivating, positive person who also is a large fan of hearing about other people's stories. So I follow him on Instagram, and I really enjoy the topics that he brings to the table. And he's also really, really good on his podcast about staying pretty unbiased about the topics that they have on there. And it talks about addiction, it talks about health, it talks about changing habits and doing all kinds of things in that book. So pretty motivational, pretty great read if you have the time. And the fourth book that I would like to talk about is called You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. And in this book, she talks about how listening means more than just hearing the person that's speaking, and actually paying attention to their tone and the words that they use while they're talking, and how most of us start formulating thoughts for a response before the other person has even finished verbalizing their thought to us, and how slowing down and actually hearing the person's thought to completion before you start formulating your response, which is really, really hard to do because that's a habit that I think a lot of us form very early in life. But I've tried very hard since I've read that book to try to implement that into my behavior, and it is difficult. It really, really is. And it goes beyond just don't interrupt people. It's really hear the words that they're saying, really hear the tone that they're saying, the order in which they use their words, everything, their body gestures, everything that they're doing. It talks about how to really just sit down and listen to somebody with the intention of truly hearing everything that they have to say, as opposed to just letting it hit your brain and immediately trying to respond to whatever they're saying. So that one was pretty impactful. It made me realize that I could definitely be a better listener, and it actually is one of the books that I read towards the very beginning of the year that really piqued my interest in hearing other people, which led me down the whole rabbit hole of listening to other people's stories and life experiences. So if you're going to start with a book, I would definitely recommend that book. Again, it was You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. Wonderful, wonderful book. And the last book that I'm going to talk about is called Super Life by Darren O'Lean. Darren O'Lean just recently did a special on Netflix with Zac Efron, and it is a wonderful series. If you're interested, I would definitely suggest that. But his book, Super Life, talks about the 5 life forces, which are nutrition, hydration, oxygenation, detox, and alkalization, I believe. He goes really into depth on all 5 of those topics and gives really wonderful real-world examples about how you can make sure that you are getting everything that you need to stay healthy and fit and energetic and really take care of your body from the inside out. And all of it is very science-based. He has traveled all over the place and talked to hundreds and hundreds of people about, different health and wellness topics, and really gone out of his way to give you lists and lists and lists of, foods that are the best for certain parts of your body, and how, not just any water, not all water is the same, and, it goes into really good detail in a very digestible way that makes sense. He also talks about how attitude builds your life, and how having a good attitude really impacts your health more than we might think it does. And that was really refreshing as well, because I think at one point or another, all of us have had sort of a bad attitude towards maybe our health or just life in general, and it really does make a difference changing the way you look at things and having a better attitude about not only your health but just your day-to-day. And he gives, I believe he also has a website that has a lot of that information as well. So Darren Olean is a very interesting man, and he knows a lot about health and wellness. So if you're interested in going down that rabbit hole, I would certainly Google his name. But yeah, to end, I was really, really happy with the 37 books that I read last year. Not all of them were as good as these, obviously. These were my top 5. But these 5 books absolutely had a very large impact on my year and my goal setting for this upcoming year. Speaking of which, my reading goal for this upcoming year is 50 books, and seeing that it is already February, I have already read 7, I think. So, doing good so far. But, yeah, maybe I will post some sort of something to where you guys can see all of the books that I'm reading. I might do a book club thing or something. If anyone is interested in that, please let me know. But yeah, if you have a favorite book that you read this year, or multiple favorite books that you read this year, please let me know what they are. I am always taking new book suggestions. So thank you very much for listening, and happy reading.